This conference will now be recorded.
So in our previous class, we started working with validations, right? So validations will be of two types, that is client as well as the server. And in order to have these validations rules to be applied in Pega, we can able to go with three rules. That is validate rule. That's what we have created yesterday. And using this validate rule, we can able to just validate multiple properties at a time. So this validate rule once created, we can able to call this from flow action, or we can able to call this from activity, and we can able to call this from another validate rule also. So meaning once we are calling this particular validate rule, it has to be in a position to validate multiple properties with the multiple conditions what we are defining there. Again, here we can able to go for combination of properties as well as the combination of conditions also. So that is the advantage with this validate rule, and this will be completely like in server side validation. So on clicking on submit button, flow action has to be submitted. Before that, flow action has to validate this all the changes by running this rule. So that is what we have seen. Okay, so today I'll show you how to create the validate rule and how to call this validate rule from the activities. So yesterday we have seen how to call this validate rule from the flow actions, right? So in the first screen, what we have seen, we have created few properties. Sorry, we have created this validate rule and we have included few conditions. On clicking on submit button of that particular flow action, this validate rule has to be submitted and it has to validate the inputs what we are given, what we're defining there. Now let us work on another requirement. My requirement here is I have to create one validate rule, and within this validate rule, I have to just check for my address details. Okay, so this is my section, right? This is for the address section. Here, once the details have been entered here, on clicking on this, it will be automatically captured to the billing section. So this is what we have done for data transform. Now my requirement here is this data has to be copied from shipping to billing only if we are entering the correct data. So on clicking on this, it has to validate the things first. If the door number is of correct format, or if the landmark or the street name, zip code, if all these are in the correct format only, data has to be copied. So just on clicking on this, we have to run one activity, and within this activity we have to call one validate rule, and within this validate rule we have to validate all the fields. Okay, so once all the fields are successfully validated, then only data transform has to be applicable and it has to copy the data to the billing section. Suppose whatever the data I enter, so whatever the data I enter here, on clicking on this, data transform will be executed and it will be copying the data as it is. And if I just click on this, again data transform will be called and it will be clearing all the fields. So this is what we have already seen. Now my requirement here is I don't want to copy the data blindly from this section to this section. Instead, we have to go for validations. So door number should be valid one, and zip code should be valid one. So unless we enter all the valid data should not be copied. So my requirement here is door number should be of this format, something like this, or post box number. So something like this. Okay, so ultimately what we want to check here, so it should not be the direct numbers. So direct numbers are not allowed here, and only the strings will not be acceptable. If I just define like this, it will not be accepted, it should not be accepted. So door number should be something like a numeric, and we have to accept the hyphen as well as the obliques. Okay, and it should not be accepting any special characters also. Okay, so special characters are not allowed, numbers are not allowed, as well as the strings, only the strings also not allowed. So ultimately what we want to do here, so for this door number property, we have to validate whether we are having this particular special characters or not. Okay, so that is one thing what I want to do for door number. And second thing in the landmark, I should not be accepting special characters. So it should be the combination of numbers as well as the letters. Even letters also is not accepted. So special characters are not accepted here. So for the landmark, only characters. And for the street name, also I want to accept only characters. And for the zip code, I should be accepting only numbers. So it should not be accepting special characters here. It should not be accepting the strings also. it should be just accepting the numbers, and here it should be just accepting the strings, and here it should be having the at least one special character, else validation should not be, I mean, it has to throw the error. So that is my requirement. Unless we get the correct data validated, then only we have to make this activity to run the data transform and to copy all the data from there to here. Okay, all anyway, this is working fine. And if we just put some conditions, if the validations is true or not, then we can able to make the data transform conditionally applicable. So this is my requirement. So for this, what we have to do, first we have to create one validate rule. So let me create one validate rule. So it can be created under process tab, right? Process category, validate. So give something like validate address. So select the context and click on create and open. So the first thing what I want to do, I have to just apply one condition for the property. So I'm selecting door number. So it is like shipping dot door number, right? So I'm selecting this. So this is the property where I want to show the error message if the correct data has not been entered. So that is the property I'm selecting here, and I have to add some conditions here. So for that, just click on add. So what should be the condition? I have to just check for the special characters, at least it is there or not. So if the special character is there, I have to allow the user to validate. And if we are not giving the correct input, we have to show some error message. Okay, so for that I have to compare the string of the door number. I have to compare the value of the door number property with some special characters. So you just identify any of the OOTB function available here or not. So if it is not there, we can able to apply the same using function library. Okay, so just to select this and click on expression builder to get into OOTB library. So click on browse. So click on functions. So here what is it? This is just like a string where I can able to compare whether it is having special characters or not. So for that we can directly go to the string library. So this is the string library, and here we can able to identify few things like whether it is having any special characters or not. So this is something for alphanumerical checking. These are all for the integer. So you can able to see something like px contains special character. So there is one OOTB function for that. So it will be just checking whether it is having any special characters or not. So but my requirement here is it should not be accepting special, sorry, it should be throwing some error if there is no special characters. So if I just select this and give the property value, so shipping dot door number. So we can able to test it directly here also. If we just click on test, we can able to see whether this is perfectly working or not. So door number, I'm giving something like this. So what it is showing? It is showing as false, meaning there are no special characters here. So if I just enter some of the special characters, what it is showing? It is showing true. So ultimately this property value will be validated if it is having any special characters or not. My requirement here is like 11-111. So this should be accepted. So this is true here. Okay. And if I'm entering something like post box number hyphen 11 hyphen 21 oblique like this. So if I just enter like this, even this is a valid door number, right? So even for this we have to even for this also we have to accept it. So this seems to be fine, but I have to show the error message if we are not entering this kind of data. So whatever as per our design, what it will be checking, it will be just checking whether we have special character or not. So that is fine for me. But now in my case, if there is no special character, I have to throw the error. So that is the reason go for the negative scenario. So I'm just putting negation here. So if I just put the negation here, what it has to do, it has to just check whether it is not having any special character or not. If it is not having any special character, then it has to throw the error. So if user or someone entering this kind of data, so what it has to show? So this is true. If this is true only, we have to show the error message. Clear, right? So my purpose is to have one special character. So in that case, if the customer is not entering any of the special character, not entering only, I have to show the error message, right? So for error message, I want to go for the negative scenario. Should be of format. So did you understand this? Why are we going for negation? Okay. So now I'm just submitting this. So I told you the importance of this continue validation also. Let me put one breakpoint here. So uncheck this. So click on submit. So one breakpoint will be applicable. Now let me add one more condition for landmark. So my requirement here is it should not be accepting any special characters here. So it should not accept, meaning if any of the special characters are identified, then it has to throw the error. I can simply copy this, right? Or let me show you again. So click on add to add the condition. Go to the library by selecting this expression evaluates to true. Go to expression builder, and here we have to select the appropriate function, that is like px contains special character. So my requirement here is to just check whether it is having any special character or not. So if the special character has been identified, it has to throw the error. So on which property? So shipping dot landmark. So just test this. So if shipping dot landmark is having any special characters, this will be true. If this is true only, we can able to see the behind screen. If this is true only, validation error message has to be displayed. So whatever the thing we're trying to do for displaying the error conditions only, right? So if this is true only, I have to show the error message. So put one breakpoint here also. So uncheck this one and click on submit. Okay. So now add one more property for street. So even for the street also, I don't want to accept any of the special characters. So click on add, go to evaluate, expression evaluate to true, and select the builder. So this is one thing, speak special character. Select this, it has to just check for shipping dot street name. If it is identifying shipping dot street name has characters, then I have to throw the error. So I can directly go for this condition. Okay. So meaning this if condition will be true if it is having any special conditions. We are not giving any negation here. Okay, so if this particular thing is true, meaning if this particular property is having special characters, I want to throw the error message. So add one breakpoint here also, submit this. So first thing what we're trying to do here is, so this if condition is true, what is the if condition? If this particular property like door number is not having special characters, then I have to throw the error. If it is having special characters, I have to accept it. So if it is not having special characters, then I want to throw the error. Okay, so that is the thing what we are trying to do there, and here we are trying to go completely opposite to that. So add one more condition for this. So shipping dot zip code. So for zip code, my requirement here is to accept only numbers. Okay, so for that we can able to just check whether it is having an existing function or not. If not, we can able to get the same from the builder also. So there will be many functions related to numbers. You can able to search in the number. I can able to directly search with that. If there are any result matching, I can able to see. We can able to see is a number. So there will be one function where it will be just checking whether it is having only numbers or not. So just click on the mouse or on this, we can able to see. So it will be returning true if it is having only digits from 0 to 9. So anything other than that, it will be throwing error. So shipping dot zip code. Okay. So if shipping dot zip code is not a number, I'm going for negation. So if if this particular zip code is not a number, I want to throw the error message. Okay, so add one breakpoint here also. So now submit this. So these are all our requirements. So just save it. So the thing what we have done is we have created one validate rule initially. Then after we have added 4 properties, and for each and every property we have added the corresponding function. And for everywhere we are trying to break the rule, break the validations here. So if I just uncheck the continue validation checkbox, so validation rule will not be executed further if it is getting breaked somewhere. So this is already we have discussed with examples also. So now I have to call this validate rule either from flow action or from the activity also. So in this process, let us go for executing it from the activity. Okay. So I think we don't have any activity for that. Let me create one new activity. Let me check whether we have already activity created or not. So we don't have any activity. Did we create any activity on that day?
No, sir.
So I didn't show you how to call this activity from, sorry, how to call the data transform from activity.
That day we.
So there is one activity, right? Clear address fields. I think here, okay, here I showed you. Okay. So let me create one new activity. Validate address. So click on create and open. One activity rule will be created. And now I can able to call that validate rule directly by using a method called Obj Validate. So using this, I can able to call one validate rule. So select the validate rule here. So this is my validate rule. And now save this. And call this activity from button click. I mean this checkbox click. So double click here, go to actions. And here let me call that activity, same activity. Submit and save this. Okay, so create the new work object ID. So for testing purpose, so for sure we have to enter all these details. Suppose if you're working in a screen number 10, let us say. So in the real project, if you're working in a screen number 10, and if you're trying to make some modifications there, and if you want to just to see the changes, whether it is reflecting there perfectly or not, what we will be doing, we have to make the changes in the Designer Studio first. Then after we have to launch the flow, and from there we have to click on submit button for each and every screen, and we have to reach the 10th screen, right? Suppose if I have validations for each and every screen, in the first screen I want to enter all the correct data, in the second screen I have to upload all the necessary attachments or the necessary data has to be entered. So for the testing purpose, in order to go to the 10th screen, you need not follow all this. Usually this has to be done, we can't able to avoid this. But for the testing purpose, if you want to make all this to be skipped off and you want to directly go to the 10th screen without entering any of the values in first 9 screens, for sure we have to go by screen only. Earlier what we have done, we have just clicked on submit button for each and every screen and we can directly go to the 10th screen. But now we are applying some kind of validations. So if the validations are meeting only on clicking on submit button, you will be reaching the next screen, right? So in that case, what we can able to do is we can disable the validations for the testing purpose only. So even in the real time also we can able to do the same. Okay, let me open that first section. So let me create work object ID, and we want to go to screen number 10. So here I don't want to enter all these details. It will be like in time taking, and that too we may not be entering the valid data also. So first name, last name, this kind of data, okay. So if they're asking us to enter something like a customer ID or the claims number, so all the time we will not be having the data handy, right? And that too data will be validated before clicking on after clicking on submit button. So for that, what we have to do is we have to go to the particular flow action and remove that in the private edit. Okay. So let me go to the section first. And the section should be having all the validate rules validated from flow action only, no? So go to view reference and open that flow action rule. So this is my flow action, and in this flow action rule for sure we'll be having the validation score. Now what you have to do is, if the rule set is locked in your version, then we'll be clicking on private edit. This will be completely for the testing purpose only. We have to click on private edit, and if it is still in the development phase, there will be checkout option for it. So just click on checkout and disable this. I mean, you have to remove this. So click on save. So no validations will be applied. This will be just for a testing purpose, and you have to discard all your changes. Okay. So if I just save this, and if I run the new work object ID, so this particular section or the flow action will not be having any validations applicable. So this mandatory we have applied at the control level, right? So we can't avoid this. And what are all the validations we have applied for this gender, date of birth, age, or all this will be skipped off. Why? Because we are not calling the validation rule on clicking on submit button. Okay, suppose if you're having many validation tool here also, many validations here also, the same process. Go there, go to the corresponding flow action, remove that flow action for the testing purpose, and you can just simply discard all the things. So if I just click on tick mark here, so if I just click on this, I can able to see all the available checked out rules from my operator. Okay, so if I have just checked out on almost like 100 rules, all the 100 rules has to be visible there. Once you click on this, we can able to see all the rules what are being checked by your operator ID, and you can able to click on each and everything, and you can able to discard it. Why? Because these changes you are just making for the testing perspective, so they should not be affecting anyone. So once you are done, once you feel that the changes are reflecting the screen number 10, we can able to discard it, and we can able to check in our changes. Clear, right? So this is our screen. So on clicking on this checkbox, we have to call one activity, and within this we should be having the validate rule executed, and we have to validate all these 4 properties. Now I'm selecting like this. So just enter some wrong input. So now if I click on checkbox, what I'm getting? I'm getting only the first one. Why am I getting only the first one? Even this is not the valid scenario, even this one and this one. So all these are not valid. Why we are getting the value here? Because on clicking on this, activity will be executed, and activity has to run this validate rule. Within this validate rule, what we're trying to do, we're trying to put some breakpoints. So validate rule has to be executed in the same order. So first it will be just checking the door number property. So if the door number property is successful, so if it is validated successful only, it will be just checking for the second thing. If it is not successfully validated, it has to break the validation rule. So that is the breakpoint here. So the purpose of this breakpoint is we will not be allowing the user to enter all other data, or we will not be validating the rest of the data unless he is correct in the first one. So he has to fix it. This has been breaked up, and we have to fix this. So if I just fix like this, so I'm fixing this. So now let me click on checkbox. What it has to do, it has to again run the activity, and in this process it will be again validating the it will be again running the validate rule. This will be true, right? I mean, this is successfully validated. So once this is successfully validated, it will be going to the next thing. So there is no breakpoint applied now. This is validated successfully, and now it will be coming to the second thing. So second thing, it will be just checking whether it is having breakpoint or not. So if it is having breakpoint, it will not be allowing, or it will not be validating the rest of the rules, so rest of the controls or the properties. So once this is fixed only, it will be allowing. So although if we give the bad input or the correct input also, validate rule will not be bothered. So this is the breakpoint. Unless this is fixed, it will not be going to the next thing for validation. So I'm entering something like this. Now again click on this, activity will be executed and it will be checking for this now. Okay, so I'm entering this one. Now if I'm unchecking this, what it has to do, if I run the, if I just click on this, activity has to be executed and it has to begin the validation from the beginning. Okay, and there it has to check for this property. If it is breaking, it will be stopping then and there, else it will be continuing for the second one. If this is true, it will be having it will be validating the next thing. So unless every property has been validated, it will not be fixing that. So if it is getting break somewhere, okay, that has to be fixed, else it will not be working on the other rules validation, other property validations. That's the important one. In interviews, they'll ask you the importance of this continue validation checkbox. So you understood, right? Clear now? So the importance of this continue validation is like a breaking the validation rule if it is having a bad input. So here in this way we can able to call the validate rule from the activities. And now if we observe on clicking on this, data is getting successfully transmitted. Even though we are giving the bad input, as per the validate rule, this is successfully validated, but still we will be getting the bad input copied. So data transform is also successfully running, but that should not be the case. If I enter all the bad input also on clicking on this, validate rule is successfully completed. Validate rule is successfully executed and parallelly it is running the data transform. Now we have to make few modifications. I don't want to have this data transform to be executed directly from here. Instead, I can able to call this data transform from the activity. So if I just call this from the activity, only once the obj validate is true, I'll be anyways I'm having obj validate in the step number 1. Once this is done, I'll be having like apply data transform in the second method. After the validation is successful, it will be running the data transform and it will be copying the data. So this is our requirement. So clear as of now? Any doubts? Clear, right?
Yes, Chandra.
So what I'm trying to do is I'm just removing the data transform directly from here. Why? Because even if it is validating or not, both will be executed parallelly. So data transform will be executed parallelly. Whatever the data we enter in the shipping, that will be blindly copied into the billing also, irrespective of the data whether it is good or bad. So that is the thing that PRPC is following because of this data transform directly called from here. But I don't want to call this directly. Instead, I can able to have this called after the validate rule. So on clicking on this, I'm trying to execute the activity, and this is the activity. And here I will be running the validate rule first, and then after we can able to call one data transform by a method called apply data transform. This is also we have discussed, right? So using apply data transform, I can able to call one data transform. So now what PRPC has to do, on clicking on the checkbox, it has to run the activity, and within this activity, it has to first go for validate rule. Validations has to be done successfully. Once the step 1 has been completed, it will be going for the step 2. So then only data will be transmitted. So check out and save this. So refresh this one. So now I'm trying to enter some. Okay, so all these are bad data, right? So I'm just clicking on this. What it is doing, so first initially activity will be executed, and based on this activity we'll be having the first validate rule to be executed, and if it is having bad input, then it will be breaking then and there. Okay, so this is working fine, but parallelly data is getting copied also, meaning activity 1 step 1 of the activity has been executed and it will be showing the validations rules. So activity step 1 has been executed successfully, just showing the error message that duty will be sufficient. So Obj Validate rule has been successfully validated and it is throwing the error. And once the step 1 has been completed, what it has to do? It has to show the second message, right? It has to run the second step. So that is the thing, second step will be executed and it will be copying the data. Okay. But my requirement here is I should not be copying the data blindly. Suppose if I just fix this, I'm fixing this now. So now I'm just unchecking this. I mean, I'm calling the activity. So error message has to be on checking this again. Activity has to be called. Activity has to execute Obj Validate rule initially, and it has to just check for the first property. This is successful. There is no breakage here, and it has to validate the second property. And here validate rule will be stopped, meaning step number 1 of the activity will be executed successfully. So it has to break and it has to come out. So that is its behavior. So step 1 of the activity has been executed successfully. Once step 1 has been completed, it is having step 2 also, right? So step 2 will be executed and it will be copying the data. The same thing. If I just click on this, it will be just doing the what we are returning in the data transform. So whatever the thing we are trying to achieve is not getting successfully completed. My requirement here is only if the data is correct. If there is no bad data, this should not be copied, meaning this data transform. So this data transform has to be given with some conditions. I should not be running this data transform, that is step number 2, all the time. So even though if you are having the wrong data, it is successfully validated using step number 1. Once the step number 1 is completed, step 2 is also being executed. So now my requirement here is step 2 should not be executed all the time. It has to be executed only on the condition where there are no error messages. Okay. So after the step number 1, even if it is having the valid data, even if it is validating the data or not, step 1 will be completed. Then step 2 will be executed as per the design. But I don't want to execute the step number 2 all the time. Instead, I have to make some I have to apply some conditions in order to make this visible, in order to make this step number 2 to be executed only if there are no error messages. So all the time we are getting error messages, even though we are getting this step number 2 executed. So for that, what we have to do is we have to go for one condition. So what is that condition? Condition should be like, it should not be executed. This particular data transform step 2 should not be executed if there is no, this should be executed if there are no error messages. Okay. So if there are any error messages in the page, I have to identify. There should be one property or there should be something, there should be one when condition created for this, and I have to just check whether the page is having any any error messages or not. So if I'm having at least one error message also, I should not be executing this particular data transform. So for that, what we have to do is we have to use one OOTB when rule for that. We need not create any of the when conditions for that. PRPC will be having some when conditions, OOTB when conditions. So if I just identify the when condition which is responsible for this, I can simply apply it here. Okay, if I just simply apply it here, so all the time before executing the step number 2, it will be just checking whether that when condition is true or not. If it is true only, the step number 2 will be executed, and based on this only we'll be getting the data copied or cleared. Okay, so the challenge here is we have to identify the OOTB when condition for that. So the OOTB when condition will be like has messages. Okay, so there will be one when condition. It will be identifying whether the page is having any messages or not. So this is important. So this should be there in the base class. So there is one OOTB when condition, and that name is has messages, and it will be identifying whether it is having any error messages on the step page or not. So from wherever we are calling on that page, if it is having any error messages or not. If it is having any error messages, this when condition will be true, and based on that we will be applying the conditions. Clear, right? So just apply the condition here. So what should be the condition? Has messages. So that is one when condition under at the rate base class. So this is the condition. So if this when condition is true, meaning it is having some messages. Okay, so this condition will be true if it is having at least one error message on the page. So when it is having error messages, I should not be executing the step number 2. Okay, so if when condition is true, meaning if it is having error messages, I have to skip this whole step. I'll be skipping this step. If I just skip this step, every time whenever we're running the activity, only step number 1 will be executed. Step number 2 has to be just check whether it is having valid data or not based on this when condition. Okay, so all the time whenever clicking on the checkbox, activity will be called, and within this activity, step number 1, that is validate rule, will be executed. Even if it is having good data or bad data, step number 1 will be successfully completed. Once that is done, second step is also getting executed, and I want to restrict that. So in order to restrict to execute this step number 2 on conditional basis, we are going for this when condition. So within this when condition, what it will be checking? So if this when condition is true, meaning if it is having any of the error messages, I don't want to have this step number 2 executed. So if this step number 2 is not getting executed, data transform will not be copying any data if it is having error messages. So just click on submit. I'm saving this. So now let me refresh this. Or I can able to see directly here also. Submit. Go to the fourth screen. So here I'm trying to enter some dummy data. So I'm giving all the time bad input only. So I'm giving the bad input only. So now if I just click on this, what it has to show? It should not be copying any data. Okay, even though we are getting the data, we are entering the data is not being copied. Okay, but this section will be made read only as per the checkbox what we are defining here. So the control for this particular section has this particular thing has been given at the control level, right? So whenever I check this, this will be made in editable or disable read only, that will be taken care of this. Now if I just click on this, what it has to do, it has to run the activity, and activity has to be executed with the step number 1. There it has to run the validation rules first. So validation rule, what it has to do, it has to execute the first validator, the first rule. So within this first rule, if it is having correctly validated this one, it will be checking for the second thing. But here we are not giving the correct data. So if we are not giving the correct data, it will not be allowing the user to enter other screens, I mean other data also. Okay, whatever the data, suppose if you're entering good input or bad input, it will not be considering this one for the validation. So it will be breaking here. I'm entering like this. Now if I click on this one, so on tab out, so click on this one. So this will be again validate activity has to be called, validate rule has to be called again, and this will be checking for the first one. It will be successful, there will not be any breakage, and it will be validating the second thing. Even second is not fine, then it has to break it then and there. So it has to accept the correct input. So if it is correctly accepting the input, then it has to just check for the third one. So likewise, the order is very important, and it has to be running in the same order if you are trying to give it in the breakpoint situation. This will be very important, useful. So I'm trying to give the correct data. So if I'm just giving the correct data only, we should be getting the data copied. So on clicking on this, what PRPC has to do, PRPC has to validate the first rule, sorry, first step. It has to just check for all the conditions whether it is perfectly validated or not. Once that is perfectly validated, has messages when condition will be turned false. So why? Because it will not be having any messages on the page. So has messages when condition will be false, and if that is false, I'll be continuing the, we can able to see, right, if that is false. So if this is false, it will be continuing the when remaining when conditions. In turn, it will be executing the step number 2. Okay. So if I uncheck this, again it has to run the activity. Validator will be executed. This is successful, and it will be clearing the data as per the data transform. Clear, right? And if I click on this, even this is working fine. This is not getting disturbed. So whatever the situation it might be. So if I just click on this, it has to clear all the fields, and it has to clear this as well, and it has to make this read only. It has to make editable, and this has to be make editable. Clear, right? Any doubts? So in this way, we can able to call validate rule from the activity, and this will be the best business scenarios. So here we have learned how to call some OOTP functions and how to call one validate rule using activities, and how to make use of the OOTP when conditions like has messages, and how to make this data transform executing on conditional basis. This will be the best business scenario. So any doubts? Do you want me to explain anywhere? If you want to make this mandatory, we can able to directly go for the from here on, from the portal level also we can able to do that. So if we directly do it from the portal level, this will be applicable in the designer studio also. We need not again go to the designer studio and save it there. Okay, so here if I'm just making it as an always, so this will be required all the time. Okay, if we go to the designer studio and refresh it, automatically that will be turned to true. Sorry, that will be having required all the time. So that's important advantage. Okay, it will be turned mandatory here. We need not again save it from here. Okay, we can able to do the changes dynamically also. Clear? Any doubts?
Chandra, we are clear, but I need some one more oral communication, like we are calling from call, process and validate, right? So when we are clicking the database, where we have to select that enable conditions, can you pass through one time?
I didn't get you. What's the database?
No, validate. So how we are doing the text box validation, can you recall once again quickly?
So text box validation, like for the minimum count, or if you want to compare two different strings. So what exactly you're expecting?
No. Whatever we did right now, can you give me the quick call, because we are writing one step for the four equations, right? If the conditions, then display messages, then door number should be formatted. This should be, and can you recall that once?
Okay. Yeah. So the thing what we're trying to do here is we are trying to apply conditions for 4 different properties and all our text boxes only, and everything will be like in string. So here in the door number, whatever the value, the string we are entering, that should be having at least one special character. So that is our requirement. In that process, what we're trying to do, we're trying to add that property, and we're going for some OOTP functions. We can able to just check for whether any of the function available here or not. So in yesterday's case, we have directly selected the function directly from here, right? So what we have done, we have just taken the function like first name relation second name, or sorry, the first string relation second string, or first number relation second string. So if we have any of the functions available directly, we can able to select that. But here this seems to be something like where we have to compare the string with the special characters. So that will not be available directly here. You can able to just check. Instead, what we have to do is we have to go for the expression builder. If I just select this, I can able to have multiple functions in that OOTP library. Okay, there we can able to have all the functions segregated in terms of an its own library. For a string, it will be having its own library. For the date, for the mathematics, or for some other things, for many things it will be having data segregated, function segregated. So here in this requirement, I have to compare the string, whatever the values we are entering in this text box, it's a string. So I want to compare this string whether it is having any of the special character or not. So in that case, we'll be going for one function like px contains special character. So this is one OOTP function. What is this function doing? So if we just enter the string value, I mean if we just enter the property value during runtime, that property value will be automatically picked up from the clipboard, and that value is having any of the special character or not. That is what it is checking. Okay, if it is having any special character, then it has to throw the error message. Okay, this is just customized now. We can able to give it anything. So from whenever we are calling this, from wherever we are calling this validate tool is not the matter. So ultimately, whenever this is getting called, it has to pick all the values from the clipboard and it has to compare the values with the functions what we're trying to do. In other technologies like Java or .NET, what we have to do is we have to write our own functions like string.length. Also, we have to define something like that. Okay, but in Pega, we need not write all this. So we have to just identify what functions we have to do. Even that will be a big challenge for us. We don't think that this will be that easy. Even though if you're not having coding here, analytical skills are very, very important in making Pega development. Okay, so to be at a glance, we can able to see that there is no coding, but it will be like a big challenge how to use and when to use which which function or the property. That will be very important. That we have to identify and that will be getting based on the practice. So during runtime, what it has to do, it has to just check for this one, and this will be having any special character or not. If it is not having special character, so that is the thing what we have given negation right here. So if it is not having any of the special character that has been entered in the clipboard, that has to be throwing some error message. Okay, if we are getting this error message, automatically this particular validation rule has to be breaked. So that is the thing. Continue validation, I'm stopping it. So validation will not be continued. So first, if it is getting break at the first point, what it has to do, it has to stop then and there at the breakpoint. Once the breakpoint is fixed only, it will be checking for the next things. Okay, and here also we're trying to do the same. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to go to the main library, that is OOTB expression builder, and there I'm trying to just check for one property called landmark. So what is the function I'm using for this landmark? I want to just check whether this landmark property is having the value from the clipboard. Sorry, it is having any special characters in that particular property or not. Okay, if the value is having special characters, then I want to show some error message. So earlier what we have done, we have just given negation for this. Negation meaning if there are no special characters, we have to throw the error message. Now if there are if there are special characters, I want to throw the error messages. So based on the business requirement, you have to think very, very analytically, else you cannot able to catch up. And here also there will be some OOTB function like number. And here what we're trying to do, we're trying to get the value of this zip code from the clipboard, and this value will be compared with one function like is number. So this value is having any number or not, that is what it is checking. Okay, the error message should be shown if it is not a number. So that is what we are going for negation. Okay, if it is not a number only, I want to go for error message, and I'm going for, sorry, I'm applying one break condition here also. Okay, clear? Anywhere you need support? Uma?
Okay.
So you still have doubts anywhere?
Chandra, I'm fine.
Okay, okay. Tulani?
Yes.
Okay. So now what we have done so far, we have just created one validate rule, and that can be called from flow action. That is what we have seen, and we can able to call one validate rule, and we can able to apply some OOTP functions, and we can able to call this validate rule from activity. And as I told you, this validate rule can be called from another place also, that is within another validate rule. So if we just check here, there will be something another like another validation rule, right? So let me select any of the thing. So this is the first validate rule what I have selected. In the first screen for the first section, I have disabled this. So in the first flow action, I have removed this from the flow action, right? Now I want to just validate from here also. So what it has to do, whenever I run the activity, this validate rule, whenever it is being executed, it has to execute this also. Okay, so let me run it. So I'm entering some meaningful value now. So on clicking on this, activity has to be executed. So this is executing successfully. So I'm not getting error message. Okay. I think first validator is also successfully executing. That is the reason it is not throwing any error. So first name. So let me create the new work object ID. So what is the conditions we are putting? It should not be. So I'm entering some details here, and his male and his age is 1. So I'm clicking on submit button. It will not be throwing any error messages here. Why? Because we are not calling this validate rule on the flow action, right? So just click on submit. So just click on this. It will be throwing some error and add something. So what are the error messages we are getting now? So these all successfully completed, but still we are getting some error messages related to mail. From where are we getting this? Why? Because we are trying to call one more validate rule within this validate rule. Whenever this validate rule is being executed, it has to execute that validate rule also. So at the last screen, if you want to just have all the details collectively to be stored into the database, there you can able to go for one round of validation again, where in the last flow action we can able to call one validate rule within another validate rule, and we can able to validate the whole data. So this can be our final check. Okay, in each and every screen we can able to make user to enter the correct input, and in the final case where we want to go for something like in revalidation. Why? Because in the screen number 1, so whenever I'm creating the work object ID, if I'm trying to have this particular flow validation rule applied in that particular flow action, so what it will be making us to do, it will be making us to enter valid data. So that is fine. On clicking on submit button of the screen, if the data is valid, it will be coming to the second screen. So by the time when I'm in the second screen, as a developer, we'll be having enough knowledge to make this value updated, make the value of first screen values to be updated with some other dummy data also. So in the clipboard, or if I run one activity, and if I just go for property set or from the data transform, I can able to assign the value of age to 0. Okay, that can be done as a developer. Okay, but PRPC will not be understanding. PRPC just has to understand and it has to validate only on clicking on submit button of the first screen. Okay, on clicking on submit button of the first screen, it will be just looking for the correct data, and that will be automatically stored into the clipboard. Like male should be greater than 21. So in the first screen, if I'm entering the age as 30, and on clicking on submit button, if I'm trying to go to the clipboard, or if I'm trying to run one activity and want to make the age to 0, so male is of 0 as of now. Now this will be accepted, right? This will be accepted as per the PRPC perspective. Why? Because it has to just validate the data only on that section, and in the second section we'll be writing the properties related to second screen. Okay, and likewise we'll be doing like this. But if there are cases where the values are getting updated somewhere by mistake with the property set, where you are trying to run one activity and there you are going for age is equal to 0 or any other dummy data, then at the last this data should be stored into database, or this data has to be stored this data has to be sent for some other third party, and then it will be throwing the error. So in that case, what we'll be doing is we'll be again calling the validate rule within the last validate rule. Okay, within the last flow action, what are the validate rule we are calling, we'll be again calling all the validate rules within that validate rule. So what it has to do, whenever that particular validate rule is being executed, it has to execute all other validate rules, and it will be just checking for each and every property. So by this time, when we're trying to execute the last validate rule, and if I'm trying to call the first validate rule within that validate rule, okay, then it will be just checking for the age property, then it can able to identify age will be 0, which will be a big blunder for. Okay, so this will be the business real-time scenarios. Clear? Any doubts? So this is all about the discussion of validate rule. So in tomorrow's class, we'll discuss the importance of edit validate, and what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages in the next class. Maybe in tomorrow's class only we'll start working with these constraints also. Clear? Any doubts?
Yes.
Okay, we'll meet tomorrow, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And Tulani, thanks for the review. Nice review.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye. We'll meet tomorrow.
Uh,